Welcome back, everyone, to Diary of an Empath. So, I'm super excited for today's episode because I have been talking a lot about parenting and being very open and vulnerable about my own past. And I've gotten a lot of messages from just stories that people have been sharing with me about their history and questions about their parenting. So, I thought I would love to just do an episode on everything parenting. My next guest is Dr. Kim Van Dusen, also known as the Parentologist. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist and is also known on social media for her amazing advice navigating parenthood, as well as hosting her own podcast, the Parentologist Podcast. Dr. Kim, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the intro. You make me sound so special, and
Well,
thank
you
you.
deserve it. We have to roll out the red carpet for you. Speaking of what you do, you talk about everything parenting. I'm a firm believer that our childhood really shapes who we are as adults. So I would love to know a little bit about your history and maybe what it was like for you growing up and how it led you to where you're at now.
Absolutely. Like you said, everyone has their own story, and I think a lot of times we only tell other people what we want them to know, or we only show the side that we want to for others to see. And I have a very complicated background, I guess, if you want to categorize it like that. When you look on the surface of my childhood, I had a fabulous childhood. I had a happy childhood. I had two parents who are still married to this day, who are on their 50th wedding anniversary. I had two siblings. We traveled the world. We had everything at our fingertips, right? I had parents who paid for my undergraduate degree, yada, yada, yada. However, when you dig a little bit deeper, especially when I started going to grad school for my MFT, that's when things started really coming to the surface, because I feel like there was always some questions that were unanswered. I feel like there was always some ghosts in the closet or things lingering in the background, and I didn't know how to put my finger on them until I started studying therapy and psychology and everything that was behind and underneath that childhood. So, did I have a great childhood? Do I say that I had a great childhood growing up? Yes. There's no bad memories, no severe big T traumas that I had growing up. I had a great childhood. However, when you dig deeper, there's those hidden traumas, those little T traumas that were hidden, like constant invalidation, constant rejection, getting the silent treatment from my parents when I did something wrong, getting blamed for everything that went wrong on a family vacation, those types of things. And when you get them as often as I did, you start feeling pretty insecure about yourself. You start feeling like you're not good enough. So you keep trying and trying and trying to keep making your parents proud, keep trying to impress them. So what did I do? I went and got my doctorate. I couldn't think of anything more that I could do to try and prove to my parents, I am worthy. This is who I am. Look what I accomplished. Are they proud of me? Do they say verbally that they're proud of me? Yes. But are those little T traumas from my childhood still there in that constant validation I got as a child, still having me try to prove myself to the world, that I am important, that I am special, that I'm smart, that I'm capable, all those things. And do I try to really break that cycle as a mom now with my kids? And I'm very careful of how I treat them, what I say, and what I do, because even though there wasn't those huge traumas that happen that I know some of my clients and friends and other family members have gone through, there's those little T traumas that people don't talk about as much. Like I said, because they're hidden, they're not on the surface, they're very covert, that do shape someone and do cause them to have certain types of issues in relationships and in parenting and all the things that add up over the years, that someone like myself went through.
And so obviously you're a mom now, and you mentioned how it kind of helped shape how you're now parenting. How do you think that changed things for you? Just kind of looking back and now you're becoming the therapist and learning more about your past and kind of like those aha moments like, oh, I never really thought about maybe I'm doing this because of X, Y, and Z. How does that affect you now when you look at your kids and how you want to interact with them? Because I know there's probably a lot of people listening like, oh my God, yeah, I did a lot of the same thing with my parents.
Right. It's hard. I have to be very mindful. I have to be very mindful of the words that come to my mouth. And if life happens, we're human, we're going to make mistakes. I'm not a perfect parent by no means. when I make a mistake, I am the first to take a deep breath and apologize and role model that for my kids. That's something I never got growing up. I don't know if specifically my mom ever apologized for anything she said or did growing up.
Same.
So, right. So I learned to be very defensive. So even in my own marriage, I'm defensive all the time. If I feel like he's mad at me for something, or if I did something wrong, instead of just taking that first initial deep breath and apologizing. It's easier to do as a parent than as a spouse. I will share that, for me at least. But my first instinct is become defensive. My first instinct is to say, no, it's not my fault. It's your fault, and I'm good because I was told I was wrong and maybe bad. All those times growing up. So so the things that I experienced as a child has led me to become defensive. Let's say in my marriage, I don't do it as a parent. I almost overcompensate as a parent because I don't want them to feel the same way I did growing up, and the same way I still feel now to this day, as a grown woman. So when I do make a mistake, if I do stamp up my kids because I'm in a bad mood because of something that I'm going through, stress and all the things we experience, on a day-to-day basis, I am the first to say, I am sorry, mommy's in a bad mood, and show them what it's like to apologize and be human and real and vulnerable. Um, when they make a mistake, I don't blame them. I don't give them the silent treatment. I don't send them to the room and tell them they're bad for having those types of emotions. I say, it looks like you're having a bad day. There's a lot of feelings going on with you. I'm here to talk to you. Let me know when you're ready for a hug, or let me know when you're ready to have a conversation, depending on their age. As they grow up, it's a little easier to have those talking moments with them versus, the more just emotional moments with them. But I do a lot of validation. That's the one thing I do as a parent now. And that's what I do teach on my blog, on my podcast, on my social handles. I teach a lot of ways parents can validate their kids. It doesn't mean the behavior that they're doing is okay. I mean, kids are going to make mistakes and they're going to do things that are wrong. They're not always going to be well behaved. But just because you validate their experience doesn't mean you're validating the behavior that they did. So if they go and they hit their sibling, that's not excusable. There still needs to be a consequence to their action. However, you can still validate and say, "It looks like you're so frustrated with your sister because she stole your toy away from you." That is really frustrating. I totally get it. I've been there before. I had a sister growing up. We used to do that to each other all the time. And then I also follow up with, it's okay to have those feelings, and we also can't hit our sister. So let's go talk about it, or, something like that. But I take those mindful moments with them, and it takes extra time, but I take those mindful moments with them to try and show them that their emotions are valid and that it's okay to make mistakes. And I'm not just going to blame them for being a bad kid, because making a bad choice doesn't equal being a bad kid.
That's huge because a lot of us didn't grow up with parents that were willing to apologize. It was just like, well, I'm the authoritarian and you're the child. So you do what I say, you don't question me, and you don't talk back. And as humans, regardless of your age, we want to feel understood. We want to feel validated. We want to feel connected. So that right there is changing the cycle. And I just did an episode with Yolanda Renteria on generational trauma, which was amazing. And I posted something yesterday on TikTok about my own experience with my mom and how, she would always resort to like name calling or slapping. Like that was her thing. But that's because it was how she was raised. Like her background is all trauma, and there's so many generational traumas that are in her family, cultural, and there's a lot of cultural stigmas that are attached to that. And so I get why she was the way that she was. I have compassion. But when I posted this, I cannot believe how many people responded. I think it's like within 24 hours, I'm almost at a half a million. And literally all the comments, it's like, it almost makes me sad and validated at the same time that so many people had the same experience with either mom or dad or even both. So I would love to ask you and even get your opinion on spanking, because I feel like a lot of us who went through a different generation with our parents, that seemed to be where they resorted to was hitting or spanking. And you always hear that, well, and back in my day, that's what we did. And you get your ass whooped, you get your ass whooped. And it's even kind of like joked about. I don't find it funny because I know that it still affects me to this day at 37 years old. And that's not something that I feel that works. I would love to hear your opinion on that. And is there data that shows that spanking works and it does, or if it doesn't, and if not, why?
Great question. And such a topic that I don't think gets talked about as much as it should. I do think sometimes spanking can be cultural to a certain extent. Do I think spanking is, like you said, a generational pattern that's getting passed on generation after generation? Do I think it happened more in our parents' generation or before that? Absolutely. Do I think it happens as much now? No, it doesn't happen as much. I think our world has evolved so much, and there is more research out there. There is more education out there that shows that this or that may not work. Things like conscious parenting, gentle parenting, mindful parenting, all these new age, if you will, types of parenting and styles of parenting have become to the surface and have just blossomed over the last decade, let's say. So there's so much more out there now for parents than there were back then. I mean, I think social media has helped. I
Hmm.
think, the internet has helped. I mean, our parents didn't have any of those types of resources. If they wanted a resource, they'd have to maybe go to a library, if that, or maybe Barnes and Noble had a parenting self-help book they could have picked up, and not everyone had the luxury to do that. So
Hmm.
parenting tips and parenting advice and the research of how our parenting affects our kids is at the forefront of our fingertips now than it ever was. So I definitely think it's changed over the years. Do I personally believe in spanking? No. Have I ever spanked my kids? No. Do I know parents that do use it these days? Yes. Is it maybe as hard, the hit I'm talking about, as hard as maybe it was back, you know, when our parents used to do it to us? Maybe. I don't know. But when I talk to parents about it now, some of my clients and friends and so forth will say, well, I just tapped them lightly just so they knew, that I'm still in charge. Now, do I try to give ways to my clients and not so much friends, because friends don't like my advice as much when I try and give it to them. So I wait for them to patiently ask for me, because I'm like always like,
Smart
oh,
move.
let me just tell you
Smart move.
something. But for clients, I do. I mean, they're paying me to hear my advice,
Hmm.
and there is research out there that shows that spanking is a detriment to children. So I share them articles with them. I say, just take a look at this and let me know what you think, so they can make their own decision about it. But I want to educate them on what it could be doing to their child that they may not even be aware of. Because, like you said, it's just something they know because that's what their parents did with them. Do I share other ways that they could go about disciplining their kids without having to spank them? Absolutely. So I'll share things like having a cool down corner or a timeout area, where they can self-regulate. I teach them that it's not necessarily a punitive timeout type place, and it's not necessarily a reward. Well, if you do good on this, you can go play in your cool down area. No, it's just a place that a child has in their home, a safe place where they can actually just go to self-regulate. It's timed, but there's things like, sensory bottles and blankets and pillows and maybe some crafting supplies like crayons and paper, where they can go and just have a cool down time for themselves. Um, and letting the parent also cool down, letting the parent know it's okay to have a self-care moment, and they can step away and say, I'm really frustrated with my child. I'm really annoyed with my child. I'm angry at my child, but I'm going to go do this. And I give them, the parents, the tools on what they can do for themselves to cool down, where they won't get so angry it turns into anything physical. So I give parents the tools for them to regulate themselves, and I give them tools to help their child regulate so it doesn't go to that physical state. Because there's lots of other things we can do that doesn't have to result in spanking.
So you mentioned the cool down circle. So let's talk a little bit about punishment. What are maybe some core examples of alternative ways to appropriately punish a child? And I know that's very subjective, right? Because we all have to do what we feel is best as parents. Environment can play an issue. There's so much that can, affect how we punish our children. But maybe for someone who's listening that has said, I've tried the hitting thing, it's not working. I want to try something different, but sometimes my 5 year old or my 6 year old, it just doesn't listen. What are some maybe effective strategies that someone can try to effectively punish, but not use physical force?
Another great question. And again, I come from a background that deals with a lot of positive reinforcement versus the punitive, I guess reinforcement or discipline. Do I believe that children need to be disciplined? Absolutely. Do I believe that children need to have consequences? Absolutely. Do I also believe that if when we focus on the children's behavior when they're doing something right, needs to be focused on more than when they're